Today I want to talk about the Director of Requiem because this is a character that we got our very first look at in Malware Toten. Given that look wasn't really anything great and didn't tell us anything because all we saw was his arm, and all we saw from there was that he had a watch and he was wearing a white shirt, which really doesn't tell us too much. So it's kind of leaving us in the position that we really were all before this, because this director character has been very interesting and started off as a character that was just mentioned, just offhand, and then from there started getting more and more interesting, even up into a point where he's become suspicious, not only to us but also to characters in the game. And because of that, that's why I want to talk about this character. And I don't want to talk about him in terms of trying to figure out what his identity is, because if we're being completely honest, we don't have any evidence at all for this person's identity. People could say it's Richtofen or Eddie all they want. We don't have evidence for that. They're just saying that because it's the only person that they think could fit this role, and they could be right, but I don't really want to go down that road of speculation without evidence. And because of that, instead, I want to just talk about what we know about this director, because he's someone that is so, I guess, mysterious, and there's so little known about him. And because of that, I've tried to make multiple videos on this character in the past, going all the way back to Firebase Z in February, that I just at the time didn't upload because I just didn't feel like I had enough information. And up until this point, I still kind of feel like that, but I still have the things we do know about him, but I'm not sure where this leaves us. And because of that, that's all we're going to be going over is, I guess, what we know about him and the questions those things we know about him pose. And that's what I feel like this video just really is. But of course, with that all out of the way, I think we could actually get into the questions of this director. First, starting off with, how is the director even involved in any of this? Well, our first mention of the director was actually in Die Maschine. You hear Weaver saying that you got orders from the director to close the rift, and that's why you do the stuff you do in Die Maschine. And that's the first time we hear of him. But it really didn't give us much. But later on down the road, we actually got a document a little bit detailing more about the director. This was in Firebase Z, and what I originally wanted to talk about. But this was where we learned that the director was the one who approached the CIA in order to make this, I guess, Office of Requiem. He's the one who created Requiem. Of course, he submitted all the stuff, and then from there, of course, he's the one who, set up everything after that. And this included picking the leaders of Requiem that we now know as being Weaver, Strauss, Major Carver, and Gray. So we know who he picked, and he picked these people for a reason. And he picked these people for various reasons that, if you want to read the documents, you guys could do that, but just know that he picked these people. Now, it's interesting because these exact same people he handpicked for the job seem to be suspicious of him. That is something we'll get into in a little bit, but it's still something that we have to take note of. Now, one thing I do want to say about this before we move on from it is that his story does seem a little similar to the story of Valentina. The difference is that Valentina took advantage of a, I guess, section of the KGB that was about to be shut down, but then she, showed them some more stuff, of course the zombies stuff that we saw all those whiles ago, and that's where they did all the zombie stuff and started their whole Omega journey that we are currently familiar with now. But his journey seems to be slightly similar, but instead of just trying to save a dying branch of the CIA, he instead had the CIA make their own branch. And this would imply that what he showed the CIA in order to make this seems to rather be very significant, or that he's already been in the CIA for a while, so he's trusted within it, so they just trusted him. So one of those two things seems to be the case, and whether it be one or the other, we're just going to have to wait and see. Of course, it could also be a mixture of the two, but again, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, another thing that I should probably mention is who's actually, interacted with the director, because this is someone that has been very secretive, like not messing around with anybody, right? And the people that we do know, as I mentioned earlier, one of them is Weaver. Another one is Carver. He has met him directly. We do know that because he went to his office, and that's where we get into something else we'll get into later in this video. But we do know Carver has met him, and we're not sure, but it seems likely that Strauss and Gray would have met him, but we don't have evidence for that. But considering every other leader of Requiem seems to have met him, it seems likely that the other two probably did also, but again, just no current evidence for that. And as I mentioned earlier, Requiem leaders have been suspicious of the director, and this is for various reasons, but the most recent ones have to do with the events of Malware Toten. For Strauss and Gray, the reason they have been suspicious is because the director had started to fund their sections of Requiem more than the other ones, Weaver's and Carver's, because they were more military, and obviously Gray and Strauss are more research and development, and he was funding them a lot. And this is, of course, frustrated at least Carver, probably Weaver too. But after he funded them a ton, after they created various things, one of them being the Cerberus, the other one being Klaus, stuff that we may get into in a separate video. But after they did that, then secretly the director just went and stole those things from them, just straight stole them, and just sent them to Berlin, which we know that we then use in Malware Toten, which is something we'll get into also in this video. But for now, that of course is going to make people suspicious of you. And then, not to mention that that the other things that's been going on, at least for Carver and Weaver. Now, Weaver's and Carver's reason for being suspicious of the director are slightly different, but also have one similarity. And the reason that Weaver is suspicious is because everything that they put on Requiem's mainframe, of course, the director reads, and then from there he's been doing different things. One of the things that really started Weaver's suspicion of the director is when, of course, the situation with Samantha happened, when they started hearing what Samantha was doing, how her powers were increasing, and that was put on the mainframe. And of course, because of that, the director then took Samantha away to do more tests and stuff like that. And then further on down the road, and where we really see that directly, that Weaver is suspicious of the director, is when we hear of the events of Malware Toten, because we heard there was an outbreak in Berlin, and Weaver and Carver wanted to send people there, but the director stopped them and did not let them send anybody over there. And of course, this made them very frustrated and stuff like that, and because of that, both of them became very suspicious. And that's kind of been the story of Weaver's suspicion of the director, and a little bit of Major Carver. But Major Carver's suspicion of the director goes back farther than anybody's. He's been suspicious of the director for a while, and in fact, it seems like the director has purposely done this, whether it be to test Carver or because of some other reasons we just don't know. Because the first time that we ever hear Major Carver's, suspicion of the director is back in Firebase C, and this is when we see a cipher where Carver's talking to Gray or Strauss, I can't remember exactly, but he says that he heard the director speaking Russian. And obviously, being during the Cold War, when you have, someone who is a part of the CIA hear them speaking Russian, it could draw some red flags for you. And because of that, ever since then, Carver has been suspicious. But that's not where it ends, because on top of that, one time when Carver went to go meet up with the director in his office, the director wasn't there, and on the table, Carver finds papers talking about some, force in the Dark Aether that is trying to enter into this one. Of course, we now know this as the Forsaken, but this was something that hadn't been given a name at the time, was going by the One or whatever it may have been at the time, but either way, he reads about this, but then just questions, why does the director know about this and not told anybody else about that? And because of that, and the final thing that I'd mentioned earlier, Carver's been suspicious of the director for a long time now, and that's a whole lot of stuff to go over. But the main point here is that the director is not even trusted by the people he handpicked, and that is very interesting to say the very least. But of course, this leads me off on two other things on the side that I quickly want to go over that I just mentioned. One is the fact that, I guess the director was speaking Russian. I mean, this could mean multiple things. Maybe he's been the mole leaking stuff to Omega or something like that, because we know there is one. It's been suspicion that was Carver, but maybe it's director. But the other thing is the fact that he's known about the Forsaken in the Dark Aether all this time, even before Omega themselves, because we hear this from Kravchenko in the map.
I am surprised you are unaware of the Forsaken. How do you think we knew? We learned from our contact in Requiem. Your organization has known about this entity longer than we have, and they left you completely in the dark. Are you sure you can trust your leaders?
And in this quote, we directly hear that one of the Requiem had known about the Forsaken before Omega. In fact, the only way Omega found out about it is because Requiem knew about it and someone leaked that to Omega. So that is something that is super interesting, because how the heck does the director know about anything in the Dark Aether? Because up until this point, we've been told and even shown in games that Omega has been ahead of Requiem. They've been going into the Dark Aether. They've been saying they're Ethernauts in the Dark Aether to collect the Ethereum there, and they've been inside of it, but yet we haven't heard of anything like that for Requiem. Yet for some reason, the director knew more about the Dark Aether than Omega. It's just something that is very interesting, and again draws some red flags because for this director character, and it's something that you got to keep an eye on, because it's something we find incredibly interesting. But now to kind of switch gears a little bit, I want to kind of update us to, I mean, we were talking about some Malware stuff there too, but we're going directly into Malware. And Malware I find interesting because he set up literally everything to happen in the main Easter egg. Like, he set up everything. He's the one who sent Klaus to the CIA Black House, or whatever they're called. I forget what they're called. He's the one who sent Klaus there. He's the one who sent the Cerberus wonder weapon there. He's the one who sent the nuclear bomb there to actually make the inversion warhead. He sent everything over there himself, which is interesting that he knew about all of this stuff. And again, it raises some questions of the director knowing more than we think he should know. Like, how does he even know how to build an inversion warhead to send everything over there in order to build it? And it just is interesting to say the very least. And because of that, again, it's just a matter of fact that it leaves questions about the director. That's constantly what we have with everything we learn about the director. We just have more questions, and the fact that he set up everything perfect for our characters who were currently doing Omega's bidding is very interesting. And again, it draws a suspicion of maybe some collaboration between him and Omega, but again, can't really say much there. But either way, I want to talk about kind of the big thing and kind of move on towards what's probably going to take place in the future of this story. And this is something that we learned about in Outbreak, but now it's kind of really being pushed. And this is Project Janus, or Janus, whatever you want to call it. And this is something that I find very interesting, because Project Janus seems to be the director's main goal. Like, he needs to do, I guess, Operation or Project Janus. That is his main thing. But the huge question comes is when you question, what even is Project Janus? Because all we know is that some people are aware of it, and some people that learn about it, they may no longer be alive soon after that, which is something we'll touch on later. But for now, it's just something that is super secretive. And honestly, we don't know much about it. The only thing that we could really go off of is what Janus means. And if you guys are unfamiliar with Janus, it's actually a Roman god, and he's the god of beginnings, gates, transition, time, duality, doorways, passages, frames, and endings. So it seems like the best way to describe him between all of those, I feel like transitions is the best way to describe the god Janus. And of course, Treyarch likes to use these names because then it'll imply something from there. Chronorium and Chronorios, or Chronos, that was a really big thing back in Black Ops 3, so I think it's very likely they're doing something similar here. And because of that, if we do kind of imagine Janus as being this, I guess, project of transitions, it probably means that something really, really big is going to be happening. And it just, to me, seems like, you know, maybe the director isn't the best guy in the world, because if he's saying that this is a transition, this is something that's going to change the world and transition the world from one time to another, to me, it seems like something definitely in regards to the Dark Aether is going to be affecting this universe. And maybe he's working with some force in the Dark Aether to make the world different, make it anew, and change everything forever, which would bring us more to, I guess, more of how the Aether story was, where people are isolated, there's not like big governments that are still involved in everything and stuff like that, and more of isolated stuff where you just have a team trying to do everything and stuff like that type of situation. I would imagine, just for example, I'm not saying that's going to happen, I should have made that clear, but it's just an example that it could be a transition like that, but it really just could be so many things. And to me, it just feels like there's something not too good going on with the director's motives. But again, once we learn more about Janus, we're definitely going to really find out what's happening. But one thing I do have to mention about Janus is that I highly doubt the director is working with the Forsaken. I just don't think that's happening, because why would he do everything he did in Malware? Literally, he sent everything over to Malware in order to stop the Forsaken from coming to this universe. So, to me, it seems like much more likely that he's probably not working with the Forsaken, but some other force in the Dark Aether. As for what that force is, I have my suspicions, but I don't really have any solid evidence of what that force could be. But that's something we're definitely going to have to spend more time in a different video. But either way, it's something that we, again, just have to keep an eye on, because what have I said about everything we've talked about here? It just leads to more questions. The last thing I really want to say, or I guess one of the two last things I want to say about Janus is things that stood in the way of Operation or Project Janus, because we actually see in the ending cutscene that the director is typing on his little computer, and he mentions one name being Valentina has been eliminated, and this seems to be good in order for Project Janus, because soon thereafter he says Project Janus can now proceed uninhibited. So it seems like Valentina, who is working with the Forsaken, seems to have been a problem in the plans that the director has. So again, pushing that idea that it's probably not working with the Forsaken here. But another thing that is mentioned right after the Janus can proceed is that Samantha and her powers are glowing, and this could present a problem. And I would only assume that this is for Operation, or again, Project Janus. And if that's the case, that is also interesting to see that both Valentina and Samantha seem to be I guess, roadblocks in the way of Janus. And what that really means for Samantha, I guess we're going to have to wait and see for her, because we all know what happened to Valentina, right? We kind of just used her as a battery, and she probably died from there. So, you know, there's probably not great things in plan for Samantha by the director, and it's probably even worse for her if he does have ill intent planned for her, because she's directly under his care. So that is not actually looking too great for Samantha here, and it's again pushing that idea that Samantha may not make it past Cold War. But of course, that's again different video for a different day. So many questions this brings, I know. But finally, I want to mention one last thing about Janus, and this is again during the cutscene, and it's right during that part where he's typed about, Janus could go uninhibited, Valentina, Samantha, everything I literally just mentioned. But one thing that I don't think many people are pointing out is that at the top of all of this, it says it's a memo, and more than that, it says it's a group memo. So does this mean there's multiple people working with the director? Is the director, like how I seem to have been describing him this entire time, not a sole force and he's working with some group? And if that's the case, who? Because that completely throws an entire other wrench into everything we've talked about, because this entire time we've been talking about the director like he's a standalone guy with his own evil plan, right? But it seems like that may not be the case, and instead he's coming up with this plan with multiple people, and as for who these people are, who knows? Honestly, who knows? I mean, with even more mysterious people kind of popping up, it really does throw things off. I mean, at this point, we don't have any evidence for the director's identity, let alone the people he could be conspiring with. I mean, these people could be maybe people in Omega, maybe Kravchenko, maybe it could be Eddie. I don't know. There's a ton of people, these people that he could be working with end up being, and because of that, it's just something that I haven't realized people are seeing people talked about, and I think it's really big that it seems like this isn't just a one-man plan. This is a full-blown conspiracy, right? So I don't know. That's the last thing I wanted to mention about that, and honestly, the last thing I want to mention about here, because this video is already way too long. It's just been me talking about, the director for way too long. I know. Hopefully, you at least found this video, not annoying, but it is interesting, though. I think it's something that we should talk about because it's a character that is probably going to play a very big role in the very near future of this story. I mean, just thinking about everything that this has been going on, especially with Janus and things I even mentioned, that, I mean, it seems like when there was a certain CIA group that accidentally found out about Project Janus, and they don't seem to be alive anymore, so maybe did the director have Klaus kill certain people? I don't know. There's just so many questions out there about this that I just love to hear what you guys think about this, because as I said, this video isn't really explaining anything. It's not a storyline explained video. This is a storyline what the heck is going on video, right? Because it's just so many questions about this one character that just are unresolved, and I hope at least sometime in the future we at least get some hints at what could be going on with this character and his plan. But regardless, that's about it for me. If you guys did find the video interesting in any way, shape, and form, I would appreciate if you guys, dropped a like, subscribe, bell, share, or any of that great stuff. But I'm gonna head out, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.